Hey, everybody, I'm David Bloom. I'm here with Daniel Frankel, my partner in Next TMT and Next TMT Talks, which is where you are dialed in. We are talking about all things technology, media, and telecom, in particular stuff around our weekly newsletter, Next TMT, and some of the things that writing back and forth for a couple of days has stirred within our souls. To start with, it's been a pretty good week for most of, if not all, the streaming services out there. A, they're making money, and B, a lot of it's coming from ad supported stuff just as we enter into a week of upfronts in the advertising world. That is the time where they sell a whole bunch of ads for the next year, and it's where you want to really do well. So all of a sudden, it seems to be money is moving into this business in a serious way. I guess we should start. Daniel, welcome to you. I had posted something in the newsletter about some educated guesses in some cases, but generally pulling stuff off the earnings reports for all of the media companies. And they're all, with a couple of exceptions, Paramount being the notable one, making money this last quarter off
Yeah.
their streaming. Operating income is a positive, which is crazy because, as you pointed out, 3 years ago, that was not the case.
Yeah, 3 years ago, we were all talking about how, or some of us were, how streaming might not work and how these big subscription platforms that the studios launched were bad ideas and they should have gone the arms dealer route like Sony, blah, blah, blah. If you looked at the financials they projected, I don't know if it's a precise timeline, but maybe the losses were a little heavier than they anticipated. I don't know. And maybe it took a little longer to get to profitability. But
I think that's safe, Dan. I mean, $11 billion in losses is probably just a little bit more than they were looking forward to.
that's what Disney lost.
Yeah, just Disney.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was heavy losses for sure. And it's going to a lot of time to make that up. But, you got to swim across the channel. And even Paramount is almost there. I think they trimmed their losses year over year by 62%. They lost 109 million on streaming, which is not a small amount of money, but you look at what they were losing before, it's
Yeah.
nearly as much.
It's not a hemorrhage, and that's really important. I mean, they're about to probably, almost certainly transfer to the hands of David Ellison, whose daddy is one of the five richest people on the planet. So we're a little bit less worried about how that works out. 100 million is like what his gas bill on his plane or something, his private jet. But that being said, you want to be making money. It's much easier to sustain a business. I think the interesting second part of this, though, is this transition, and it's very well timed to understand what it means with upfronts. This transition to a substantially ad-supported business, which feels very much like broadcasts and basic cable, right? It's like we've been here before for the last 70 years, and we're back again. The Empire Strikes Back.
I was surprised as part of its quarterly state of subscriptions report, research company Antenna, which is quite good, released a little abstract from that on Friday. And it showed the level of infiltration that ad-supported plans have made with the major premium SVODs. And 48% of customers now are on ad-supported tiers. The trade-off between a few commercials. I mean, the loads are really manageable for the most part. I don't mind them. I know some people who do. I mean, they're nothing like basic cable loads where you're looking at 15 minutes of advertising on Shawshank Redemption. It's a trade-off consumers want to make, and they seem to the churn rate on ad-supported tiers is much lower. The uptake is much higher. It's a winning formula for them.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we got into a little bit earlier, can they keep the ad loads reasonable? And these are not companies that have shown much restraint over time with keeping ad loads to a level that is not existentially threatening to them while they wring every nickel out of things. And two, are some services more likely? Because I think, and I think you may agree, that a lot of these services are that where they're in and out, the churning is in and out. Oh, you got some shows this week I care about, or this month that I care about, so I'll do you. Or I'll only do the ad support to get in, and I'll stick around on ad support because it's only $7 as opposed to 15 or 12, and so it's not as big a bite, and I'll keep it around. Like some services may be, like they're only dating, they're not getting married, right? And maybe they go out for a month and then they go on a little hiatus, or they don't call as much or whatever. And I'm just wondering which services end up being mostly ad driven and which still have enough quality that are perceived to be, oh, we'll pay full boat for this one. It'll be interesting to see. Is that Netflix and Max? On the one end, is it, Apple TV Plus, which doesn't even have an ad supported tier somehow still? Or is it, on the other end, is it going to be, I don't know,
I don't
Paramount?
know, it's hard to know at this point, but the consumer has proven to be really price sensitive when it comes to streaming. You just look at those churn metrics that, you
They're
know,
ugly.
they got a little better actually, but they're
Yeah.
they're bad. Yeah. Bundling, as you mentioned, you talk about the factors that turned it around. These economical bundles seem to be working quite well too.
Right. I feel like you're getting a bargain, I think, is part of that. It's like, okay, and I can't get rid of the whole bundle because then I gotta like hate everything. Right. It's
Right.
like
Individually, I mean, like Max is what, up to 15.99? I'm going to get it wrong, but it's around there.
it's in that ballpark, yeah.
Yeah, it's on par with Netflix, which is sort of indispensable. And Max is pretty good, but I don't know that it's got quite at this point what Netflix has.
Yeah, I see Netflix as basically a utility, right? So you need your water, you need your power, you need your broadband, you need Netflix. That's just what you do. And then everything else is kind of gravy. Maybe Spotify for 150 million people in the world who subscribe to that and pay for it. But there are certain services that get treated more like a utility than something you volunteer. Yeah, maybe this month I'll pay for it, or I'll splurge a bit or whatever. I feel like so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next few years and what that means for their experience and what they do for their users and what that means for advertisers and the audience that they get there as opposed to some places more
Well,
premium.
the utility
That
this week, as you know, we talk about it quite a bit in this week's issue, is making a major change on us. The Netflix UX, which has been relatively stable for the last dozen years or so, is undergoing a major transformation. And I know
Yeah, you say stable, and I say static. They have made changes along the way, but it's really crazy. You pointed out, and this is a kind of an astonishing number. The last time they made a full boat train transition, they had 30,000 streaming
Kevin
subscribers.
Spacey had a career.
30,000.
He was their big star at that point.
Yeah, and now they stopped counting at 301 million, which is 100 times more, and that's maybe it's 10,000. I lose track of the zeros. My little brain just can't
Who
keep
was their
track, but it's a whole
their head product manager? I think
so
her name is Eunice Co.
Kim,
She
Eunice
Eunice
Kim,
Kim.
Chief Product Officer. Yeah.
Apologies for that. She had some fairly eloquent comments in the promotional video that Netflix released to sort of explain what's happening. You're programming for you double and add 30 to the subscriber number, which is over 300 million worldwide. You're talking about 700 million users when you're talking about multi-member families on the platform,
Yeah.
different cultures, different regions, different demographics, ages, gender, so many different tastes. And
I mean, just in LATAM, right? I mean, just the difference between language, Spanish language in Mexico versus Argentina versus
right,
Cuba, not during Cuba, but the Dominican, right, is different, and the cultures and those cultures don't always like each other very much. In some cases, like Argentina went to war with Chile, and Uruguay, I think, had some pretty nasty fights with Brazil, et cetera, et cetera. So just stuff like that. How you do all that stuff in a culturally smart
in
way.
the annals of consumer products, this is like a Coke or McDonald's problem. Not that many consumer brands have had to like speak so many different languages and serve so many different types of people. And
Right. Netflix is the Procter and Gamble. of streaming.
Ms. Kim made the point that an entertainment company has never attempted something this ambitious before.
Yeah. They've never had the reach and they never had the ability. She's absolutely right. And as far as this goes, companies have never had the reach in as many places. And Disney's starting to catch up. Max is rolling out stuff. I think they're about a third of the way. They're like 75 countries, 80 countries now. Disney's like 150, and Netflix is at 195, close to 200. They've never had the reach, and they've never had really the ambition to provide more than stuff that came out of Hollywood, right? Los Angeles centered stuff. And Netflix is doing it in 50 production centers around the planet, and stuff bubbles up all over the place. And sometimes it goes, international, and sometimes it doesn't. But you're taking care of your home folks, wherever that is. Nobody's done that. And that's such a really interesting challenge. You're right.
It's a company led by really smart people with a lot of smart people in it. And I know they know what they're doing. As I've alluded before, I'm a little bit of a Luddite. I get, very comfortable with the current user interface, like blockbuster, box tops, endless sea of scrolling. I don't really mind that. But supposedly there's a lot of sort of intuitive innovation happening here. There's also risk when you change something as major as that. I'm not going to say it's Quickster, but it has the potential, if it goes wrong, to be that level of a debacle. Even Quickster like sunk Netflix stock like 30%. They lost 80,000 subscribers. I think they spun off their DVD business 13 years ago or so.
For about an hour and a half, and then that didn't work out. So
the reaction to that was so extreme.
Yeah, that was a different era, and there is always, and as somebody who went through multiple redesigns of newspapers and publications that I worked for, and invariably, Mrs. Smith from down the street called in to say, I can't find my horoscopes. Where's the death notices or whatever? Because we put them somewhere else and ruined everything. And, what the heck are we doing?
Are these Los Angeles Daily News stories or what?
No, way before that. Way before. But I went through redesign. I went through a brutal redesign at Deadline, as a matter of fact, when they were running an old content management system and a new one at the same time for months. And weirdly, they didn't work well together. And I got to be the interface because I could speak technology, and none of the other really hardworking journalists there had a clue really about basic stuff. So I was the translator, and as I've often gotten to be over the decades, between technology and journalism, or technology and entertainment. But that being said,
who was it? I'm thinking of who was the guy that? No, never mind. I'm mixing up my metaphors.
Yeah, well, that happens. You start throwing metaphors out there, they start mixing it up, and you get metaphor miscegenation.
Anyway,
and it's
go ahead.
Ugly thing, legal, but not attractive. It's interesting that even Paramount Plus, which lost 109, I think, $1 million, that was win. So everybody's kind of getting healthy on this side. Now the flip side is the money they're making is not going to be enough to make up for the money they're slowly losing on their linear side, on their broadcast and cable side. And what's happening in this sort of the theatrical exhibition business used to be an $11 billion business. These days, it's lucky if it gets to $9 billion, and I'm not sure it's going to get there. It's had a couple of good weeks. Great. We'll see how that goes. They got some nice looking sequels that people will go to, but it is not an $11 billion business anymore. So that has impacts.
The media networks are still the biggest, even though the rate of attrition is always in the double figures. I think Paramount's linear networks declined 13% this first quarter year over year, but it's still the biggest lion's share. It's still, I think, twice as big as streaming.
And the margins are better. The margins are better still. So we'll see. We'll see when that changeover happens. I think that's going to be a really interesting time when they get to enough money coming out of streaming to make up for the declines on the other side, or what the business settles into in a post-linear world where they're more vestigial. They don't go away, I don't think, though a lot of those cable networks will go away. They don't go.
It's hard to predict. As you noted, we're living in the first week of an executive order to put 100% tariff on foreign films.
Right.
And what's a foreign film? Everything I watch has elements in Vancouver and
Financing from France or Korea, and stars from England and Wales and Ireland, because those are all different, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's sort of hard to figure out.
it's bananas. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think who was the local congresswoman that there's a video that our newsletter this week.
Yeah, her name is Lauren Friedman, and she is Laura. I'm sorry, not Lauren. Laura Friedman. She's a Democrat. She represents a bunch of towns and neighborhoods that have studios in them, like Burbank and Glendale, and North Hollywood, and those areas. And it's kind of ground zero for a whole bunch of the movie production and TV production industry in Los Angeles. And she basically summed it up in a little scene. There's a clip from CNBC where she came on Friday and sums it up basically with like, huh? Like, no one knows what's going to happen. Now,
Right.
that said, on Tuesday, I moderated a panel at a alternative investment conference called Uncorrelated that was quite interesting. And I did a panel on entertainment finance. And I had some people on that panel who, there are some things that are good, but and some of the folks who talked with me before and after, who are film, raising money in the film business to make movies, it's just going to get a lot tougher right now because of the uncertainty. Until we get some clarity on what this all means, it's going to be a lot tougher to cobble together what was already a difficult process of, money, timing on your star availability, the right director, a good script that you feel confident about, the right deals and
Right.
tax breaks and all that to make
It's a miracle when it comes together
it
already.
really is. It really is. So all of that just got that much more. Even if there's nothing else happens other than some random musing on the toilet by our only president.
That sounds like, from what I hear, I know some of the bad ideas actually become policy this time. There's a lot more serious to it. But I'm hearing from people who know the film business who've been to Washington that this one doesn't feel like it'll actually be a thing.
Right.
It'll-
Now,
so,
one of the guys on my panel who makes money upfront in cash to productions that have tax rebates said that one of the things that would make sense, that was also included in the presentation from John Voight, one of Trump's special ambassadors to the film business, the movie entertainment business, and his manager, a separate thing from the tariff idea was a national tax rebate process similar to what California has done. And California is supposedly going to more than double in early July under Gavin Newsom. Several other states have these things, but we've never had a national one. Many other countries, a number of other countries, have been scooping up deals with nice national rebates and incentives for filming where they are, and they're getting those jobs, and people are having to go
right.
to the country. So having something that's more competitive, that makes it, if it's like the money's in the ballpark and you get to sleep in your own bed, looks a lot better. So we'll see how that plays out.
If there was a prioritized, coherent, thoughtful policy initiative from the federal government to help domestic production, Hollywood production, that would be lovely. But
Would.
I don't have a lot of confidence that that's what's going to happen right now. So
It may take a while to get. I mean, Trump did at least state that he was only trying to protect good U.S. jobs, and I certainly am not opposed to that and support that and hope that that does happen. The track record so far has been a little erratic, I think it's safe to say, and this is a very complicated area, so it may not it may not be top of the list of priorities, and we'll see how it plays out.
it,
Go ahead.
go ahead. No, like you said, it's services related. It's not like manufacturing cars. It's
Right.
that, which is pretty complicated, supply chain wise anyway. This is probably even more complex to manage from, a taxation perspective. But
Well, but the thing that gets lost is this is one of the very few industries, perhaps the only one of note, that runs a trade surplus with the rest of the planet. A, B, does create lots of jobs. C, doesn't leave a whole lot of environmental mess. And D, helps project, and this is sort of old school, it's not necessarily embraced by the Trump administration, projects U.S. soft power around the planet in a way that's subtle, and people just
I don't think there's a lot of appreciation for that subtlety right now. I mean, I'm
yeah,
a big believer in the soft power that things like USAID and all those.
yeah,
So we're getting rid of anyway. We don't need to get into that, but
right, right.
I'm in agreement with you. It matters.
So we did have a little thing that I thought was of note. Somehow the NFL keeps carving up that golden goose of TV rights and found another, I don't know, random body part to toss to Google/Alphabet for the opening week football game in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And the international expansion is a big push by the NFL. It's where they think the growth is going to come. Makes total sense. And look at this. We've got another little thing we can sell. We got two games on Christmas we can sell to Netflix. We got a streaming thing we can sell to Peacock. We got, a playoff game. We got
Well, this already existed. I mean, Peacock had it last year,
yeah, right.
and I think they paid 105 million to license it.
And it's going to be more than that this year, right?
It will.
Yeah.
And, it coincides, as you rightfully point out, with a push to expand from 17 regular season games to 18, something that the Players Association will probably agree to once roster sizes are allowed to expand, create a little more depth in the teams, and more money is thrown into the collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, it's got to get a little sweeter because they're getting their butts beat up every week. And it's like, okay, bigger roster. So we've got a few extra bodies here. Pay us more money because they're playing an extra game. Everything's going to get bumped up, another 1/17 or whatever that number ends up being. And I do think that's an inevitability because there's money to be made there for everybody. And if the Players Association can say, okay, we're going to be able to add 5 people to the roster or something like that, or even 3 people times 32 teams is another nearly 100 members. And that's not nothing either. That's growing their membership base and taking care of their people and making sure they're all getting paid. So it'll happen, it feels like. One of the things that Netflix did, I like one of the reasons for the transformation of Netflix interface because they want to be able to show things like sports,
Right.
live events, and games, video games, which they've been investing in for the last 2 or 3 years in increasingly significant
Right.
amounts as they keep trying to tweak what that's going. But they're getting out of what was a kind of a game-like experience. They are sunsetting the Bandersnatch interactive episode of Black Mirror, their creepily prescient sci-fi anthology. Bandersnatch was a big deal in 2018. It is a gone deal in 2025, which says a little bit about where they're going, but also where interactive experiences are going. I'm betting that what we'll see is more game-like experiences that get elevated to some more narrative kinds of thing that sits between a game and a film or something like that.
Netflix and chill, Dave. Netflix and chill.
You once again, my trusty old friend, are displaying your indifference to the technology that transforms our lives in a way that your sons, I'm sure, would scold you for, and rightly so, I might add. Whereas I gleefully trip lightly into the future with my arms wide open, saying, entertain me in new ways. Bring it on. I can't wait.
That's why I read you religiously every week in Next
That's
TNT.
what you should do. Also, because what else are you going to do on a Sunday before we send it out to our hundreds of thousands of beloved readers? The Bandersnatch thing, though, is interesting just in terms of it's an end of a particular landmark, and I'll be fascinated to see what comes next. Another thing that's been around for a very long time, Neil Young. I happened to throw in, he had a song. This guy's been writing protest songs for about 6 decades now.
Oh, I know. I've got a boomer brother who I used Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Young.
Well, sometimes young, not always young. Sometimes he was off like doing other things, but then Stills young. Long May You Run.
Wasn't my taste at the time.
There's a nice cover of Long May You Run by Steve Earle that's out floating around this week too. But Neil has a new song called Let's Roll Again that's trying to get GM, Chrysler, and Ford to make clean cars, clean electric vehicles. And along the way, because he says the Chinese are way ahead of us, we got to catch up. Runs real clean, something useful that runs real clean. I'm all for that. And then he says, And this is a shot across Elon Musk's bow. If you're a fascist, then get a Tesla. If it's electric, it doesn't matter, which is a kind of a Tesla's line. Yeah, and Hyundai have figured it out. And they've got serious competitors there. And the Chinese have indeed fleets of this stuff that are cheap and do the job well and have great range. So really needs to pay attention to his knitting. And having a guy who's 6 months from his 80th birthday put out a barn burner of a rock song and video, which we include a link to. I mean, it's really interesting because Neil's checking in from about 3 or 4 different front lines of the political war, so it's not bad for a guy still doing that. But more importantly, it kind of says some of where we are now.
Yeah, the Canadians are motivated,
Right.
you know.
He's technically Canadian American. I think he married an American woman. I think he's got American citizenship, but he was Toronto born. And I might add, his father was not only a journalist, but an incredibly prolific book author. Wrote 40 books, including one about his relationship with his rock star son. So
Wow.
called Me and Neil. But his father was a prominent journalist, and particularly in sports, and worked for a lot of the big publications like Maclean's and the Toronto Globe and Mail. So Neil comes from reportage honorably.
Well, the Winnipeg Jets got jobbed on a goal today.
Ah,
I don't know if you saw that. The Dallas Stars
I missed that.
won the game. We got 3 Canadian teams in the Stanley Cup playoffs in the semifinal round. Edmonton, Winnipeg, is it Montreal? No, Toronto.
Oh,
Toronto
Canadians.
Maple Leafs. I have a friend who's a diehard Maple Leafs fan. He'll kill me. But I'm rooting for one of them to win the cup this year. It's time. We can't have Florida winning it every year. It
Right.
seems wrong.
Right. Well, I mean, the Oilers are definitely playing at a very high level, so they'll be okay.
Yeah, every year they take out the Kings. So
Yeah, yeah.
another bit of news, streaming related. David Eilenberg, who has or had a really big job at Roku, head of their content. And I interviewed him a number of times, most recently at the end of March. He impressed me. I mean, we covered a lot of ground from YouTube to the fast business to the SVOD business. And he just knows a lot of stuff and had a lot of insights that I didn't know that really helped me. He came from a very prolific British-based company, ITV America, and is going back to ITV America. What is it? Love Island USA on Peacock. They produce a lot of really big
Yeah,
reality.
a ton of like name brand reality shows: Queer Eye, Hell's Kitchen, The Voice, The Real Housewives of New Jersey, and wherever else. But those are all in the reality TV world, major properties. So he just couldn't pull himself away from reality, which is so different than the rest of us these days.
In other Roku news, they are being sued in Michigan for a violation of COPA Act, which I think
Child
has to
Online Privacy Protection Act, I believe.
yeah, for children's data. They're accused of improperly gathering digital data on kids and letting their vendors do it as well, and then using it improperly. It seemed to me, I discovered it just searching around the other day, that this could be a pretty influential bit of litigation. There's probably more like it happening.
Well,
But I
and
really want to keep track.
and not that Roku is got any presence in Europe, but that's the sort of thing that gets the EU just ramped up big time. So they may be wanting to see what's happening with other TVOSs in Europe and how they're collecting data and from people that are underage and not able to give consent. So that'll be something I think that has some potential down the road worth watching.
Yeah, we kind of went into it in a paragraph or two. It's it's deeper than that. And
It's
speaking
deeper
of
than that, but
deeper than that,
it's very early, so we'll see what happens. So coming up, we got upfronts this week. Any thought?
yeah, but there's a few earnings reports that we kind of fly through. The trade desk, which got hammered in the fourth quarter.
Oh, it was ugly. I mean,
Yeah,
oof, they missed big, and the market just murdered them because they had been flying very high, not quite meme stock level, but they've been flying very high. Everybody's like, okay, this is going to be the dominant, publicly traded, independent operator. They're going to get into a TVOS with Ventura, their own operating system, which you wrote about a lot, but I was like, huh? Who's going to sign on for that? But it's the data, baby. It's the data. And but then they missed, and they missed huge, and then they reverse missed in Q1 and hit big, and then their market
Right.
things went up, which
It's
is fine. Except if you are an investor, you kind of go, do they know when their money is going to show up? Because that doesn't feel like a really good stable business if it's like way off down 1 month or 1 quarter and then way up the next quarter. Doesn't seem good.
I covered expiry TiVo earnings earlier this week, and it seems like, if you want to create a TVOS at this point, given the infiltration of the giant platforms, the Googles and the Samsungs, Amazon, Roku, you're looking at a real niche business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're kind of creep along. Their goal is to get to 7 million addressable
Hmm.
households for a an advertising business at some point. And for what they're trying, what their goals and forecasts are, that'll work. But it doesn't appear that business is open anymore. That was my takeaway from it.
Yeah. It feels overstuffed. Just like, there's still some streaming services coming online. It's like, okay, you're just nibbling on the leftovers at this point, the stuff that falls off the picnic table on the ground underneath. I mean, it's like you're not going to get big numbers. So how do you make money on the little stuff? A company like Curiosity Stream, Laura Martin from Needham wrote about them. They're making so much money off their sales of their 300,000 nature videos to large language models, AI training, that they finally made a profit this last quarter.
Can you keep doing that? I mean, is that something that's
Right.
going
It
to be?
feels like, okay, that's a good day one. Then what? A year later, selling the same video, maybe it's to another or LLM. I don't know. But
That's a growth opportunity for journalists right now. Train AI to replace you once and for all.
it'll just put us out of our misery. In the check
Yeah,
out,
anything that will do that will.
check out Next TMT. It's a weekly free subscription newsletter. Opt in. You'll find lots of joyous, fantastic data. Occasional bit of snark from Dan, not me, because I'm very serious, and possible occasional humor as well. Again, not from me, because I'm very serious. And Daniel, thank you. We are getting ready for Stream TV, where we will be the shock troops beefing up coverage of that together and doing more
Yeah, it's
video
coming up in about 4 or 5 weeks
about a month from today, as a matter of fact. So
in Denver. Yeah, we're going to do the video sessions and put together. It's not a show daily. Comes out daily. It's a newsletter that we'll be doing.
it's a daily newsletter about the show, but it's not a show daily. Let's just be very clear. Very clear.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
It's not that.
Not a show daily. So
And this week we have Upfronts. I'm not going to New York, but I'll be tracking them.
yeah, we'll be tracking from afar, and got a few more things coming up. So anyway, it's a good one, and thanks for another great week. Don't forget, you can subscribe to NextTMT's newsletter at nexttmt.com and get it delivered straight to your own personal mailbox every week in glistening, beautiful, perfect form.